Chapter 1. The Shelter at Dusk. The cat had been watching her for 3 days. Aira noticed it first on Tuesday, when the autumn rain had turned the shelter's windows into weeping glass. Among the cages of mewling tabbies and anxious strays, one black cat sat utterly still, amber eyes fixed on her with an intelligence that made her skin prickle. By Wednesday, she'd convinced herself it was coincidence animals stared, after all. But Thursday evening, as she lingered past closing time to avoid returning to her empty flat, those eyes followed her across the room with the precision of a predator tracking prey. "That one's been here 6 months," said Mrs. Havard, the shelter coordinator, her Welsh accent softening the words. "No one wants a black cat. Superstition, you know." Aira approached the cage slowly, her nurse's instincts noting the animal's perfect stillness, the way its breathing barely disturbed its sleek fur. Up close, she saw what she'd missed from across the room, a small scar above its left eye, silver against the black, shaped like a crescent moon. "What's his name?" "Hasn't got one. He came in without a collar, half-starved, but won't eat the cheap food. Particular, this one. Mrs. Havard jangled her keys. "We close in 10 minutes, love." The cat tilted its head, and Aira could have sworn it understood every word. Something in those amber depths called to her a loneliness that mirrored her own, a recognition she couldn't explain. 3 months since the accident. 3 months since she'd lost her sister to a driver who'd run a red light. 3 months of living in a city that felt hollow without Gwenllian's laughter. "I'll take him." "Mrs." Havard's eyebrows rose. "You sure? He's not exactly friendly," scratched the last volunteer who tried to handle him. But when Aira opened the cage, the cat stepped out with liquid grace and wound around her ankles, purring like distant thunder. His fur was silk beneath her fingertips, cool despite the shelters. Warmth. The flat felt less empty with him in it. Aira set up food and water in the kitchen of her tiny Bridgeend apartment, where streetlight filtered through lace curtains her grandmother had made decades ago. The cat she'd decided to call him Bran, after the old legends explored every corner with meticulous attention, pausing occasionally to stare at shadows that held nothing she could see. "Just you and me now," she whispered, watching him from the threadbare sofa. Bran leaped onto the cushion beside her, settling with his body pressed against her thigh. The weight of him, the warmth, eased something tight in her chest. For the first time in months, she fell asleep without crying. She woke to the sound of breaking glass. The clock read 11:58 p.m. Moonlight spilled through the window she was certain she'd closed, pooling silver on the hardwood floor. Bran was nowhere to be seen. Heart-hammering, Aira grabbed the kitchen knife she kept in her nightstand, a habit from her nursing shifts in Cardiff, when she'd walked home alone through streets that grew teeth after midnight. Another crash from the living room. She crept forward, bare feet silent on cold wood. What she saw stopped her breath. A man stood in her living room, surrounded by shattered glass from the vase she'd knocked off the bookshelf, except she hadn't knocked it off. He had, clearly, judging by the way he examined his bleeding palm with detached curiosity. Tall, impossibly so, dressed in clothes that belonged to another century. A black coat with silver buttons, a high-collared shirt, boots that reached his knees. His hair fell past his shoulders, black as raven wings, and when he lifted his gaze to meet hers, she saw eyes the color of molten amber, the same eyes that had watched her from the shelter cage. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said, his voice like smoke and velvet, Welsh accent thicker than any she'd heard in the city. "The transformation is disorienting. I forget about human fragility." He gestured to the shattered vase, then to her with those blood-stained fingers. "I am a Nurin, and you, I believe, have adopted me." The knife trembled in her grip. This wasn't possible. Hallucination, perhaps grief, could do terrible things to the mind. She'd seen it in patience, that desperate grasping for anything to fill the void loss carved out. "You're not real," she whispered. He smiled, and she saw the fangs. "More real than you might wish, Aira." She hadn't told him her name. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight with agonizing slowness. And Nurin, if that was truly what he called himself, made no move toward her. But his presence filled the small room like smoke, suffocating and inescapable. He was watching her the way Bran had watched her at the shelter, with ancient patience and something that might have been hunger. "How do you know my name?" Her voice emerged steadier than she felt. "I know many things." He moved to the window, careful not to step, into the direct moonlight streaming through the gap in the curtains. "Your sister died in April. You work night shifts at Princess of Wales Hospital, You take your tea with honey instead of sugar. You talk to photographs when you think no one's listening. Ice flooded her veins. You've been spying on me. I've been surviving. The word came out bitter. Do you know what it's like? Existing as something half alive, trapped in a form that cannot speak, cannot explain. I have been that cat for 6 months, Era. 6 months of cage and kibble and the constant fear that I would die in that wretched form before midnight could free me. He turned to face her fully, and in the dim light she could see. He was beautiful in the way old cathedrals were. Beautiful, cold, perfect, touched by something beyond mortal craft. But his eyes held an exhaustion that centuries couldn't disguise. Every night I transform. Every dawn I become the cat again. His hand clenched around the window frame, and she heard the wood creak. I have been cursed for 300 years. And you, Nurse Ira of the gentle hands and grieving heart, are the first person to choose me in half a year. The knife felt absurd now, useless against whatever he was. She lowered it slowly, her nurse's training warring with every survival instinct screaming at her to run. What do you want from me? Sanctuary. The word fell between them like a stone into still water. Nothing more. I will not harm you, I cannot. Bound as I am to the one who claims me. You signed the adoption papers. That makes you my keeper until the curse is broken or Dawn returns me to 4 legs and fur. This is insane. Yes. He smiled again, sadder this time. But you already knew your life had become strange the moment you felt compelled to choose a cat who watched you like he understood your every thought. The clock struck midnight with 12 solemn chimes. Aira watched in horror and fascination as Anurin's form began to shimmer. Contract. He gasped pain or relief. She couldn't tell and dropped to his knees. The transformation took seconds. Man folding into beast, limbs shortening, face reshaping. Where the impossible stranger had knelt, Bran sat, licking one black paw with feline composure. He looked up at her and meowed once, then padded to the bedroom as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Aira stood alone in her living room, surrounded by broken glass, and the lingering scent of rain, and something darker iron, perhaps, or very old blood. Her hands shook as she set down the knife. 3 months of grief had hollowed her out, left her numb to everything except the ache of absence. But this was terror and wonder braided together, a mystery that demanded she either flee or step forward into shadows she'd never imagined existed. She thought of Gwenllian, who'd always believed in the old stories their grandmother told, who'd laughed at Ira's skepticism and insisted magic was just science the world hadn't explained yet. What would you do? She asked the empty room, the ghost of her sister. The answer came in her own heartbeat, in the way her feet carried her to the bedroom where a black cat curled on her pillow, already asleep. She would stay. She would listen. She would discover what curse could trap a man in fur and fang, and whether a lonely nurse with gentle hands could possibly set him free. Chapter 2. The hour between. Morning arrived with pale light and the ordinary sounds of the city waking. Cars on wet pavement. A neighbor's television through thin walls. The distant cry of gulls carried inland from the coast. Aira lay in bed watching Bran sleep, his small body rising and falling with each breath, and wondered if she'd dreamed the entire encounter. But the broken vase still littered her living room floor. She called in sick to work the first time in 3 months. Her supervisor, kind Mrs. Davies, asked no questions, only told her to rest and return when she was ready. Grief bought you grace, Aira had learned. People expected you to fracture eventually. They just didn't expect vampires. She spent the morning researching, her laptop balanced on her knees while Bran sprawled across her feet with the boneless contentment of an ordinary cat. Vampires in Welsh folklore. Eladi Wen, the white lady who drained travelers. Grachi Ribbon, the hag who foretold death. But nothing about men who wore both fur and fangs. Nothing about curses that split a soul between shapes. You're not helping, she told Bran, who opened one amber eye and yawned, showing tiny needle teeth. The day crawled past. She cleaned the broken glass, made tea she didn't drink, avoided looking at the photograph of Gwenllian on the mantel. By evening, anxiety coiled in her stomach like a living thing. What would she say to him? What would he expect? What if he'd been lying about not being able to harm her? At 11:45, she positioned herself on the sofa with the kitchen knife, hidden beneath a cushion just in case, and waited. Bran sat in the center of the living room, grooming his shoulder with meticulous attention. At 11:58, he stopped, stood, stared directly at her with those knowing eyes. The transformation was quicker this time, or perhaps she simply knew to watch for it. Reality rippled like water, and suddenly Anurin stood where the cat had been, steadier on his feet than the previous night. He wore the same archaic clothing, though she noticed now the fabric was fine quality despite its age, the silver buttons genuine. "Good evening," he said, as if this were a perfectly normal social call. "You're really real." The words escaped before she could stop them. Regrettably, he glanced around the flat, taking in the cleared glass, the tea things on the table, the way she sat with her spine rigid against the sofa back. "You didn't run. I confess I expected to wake in the shelter again. I thought about it. Honesty seemed the only currency worth trading in this surreal space they occupied. But I'm tired of running from things I don't understand." Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He moved to the armchair across from her, but didn't sit. Even standing still, he carried himself with the controlled grace of someone who'd spent centuries learning not to break fragile things. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the chair. "It's my flat. You're the one who appeared in it uninvited. Technically, you invited me when you signed the adoption papers." A ghost of a smile. Ancient magic is particular about such things. Thresholds, contracts, names freely given, they all carry weight. "Is that how you became cursed? A contract?" The smile died. "Yes." He sat then, arranging himself with old-fashioned formality, hands clasped loosely in his lap. In the lamplight, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, or rather, had been young when he'd been changed. Perhaps 25, perhaps 30. The age when men in his era would have been establishing themselves, building lives that stretched toward normal futures. "I have 12 hours, he said quietly. "Midnight to midnight, I am as you see me now. Then the dawn comes and I forget. The cat knows nothing of the man's memories, the man's thoughts. It's a mercy, I suppose. I wouldn't wish to remember being trapped and helpless while conscious of what I'd lost. But you remember now. You remember being Bran." "No. I remember being Anurin who becomes Bran, if that makes sense. The curse preserves my human mind during these hours, lets me speak and think and feel as I once did. But come dawn." He spread his hands, a gesture of helpless surrender. "I will forget this conversation. I will forget you chose me. I will only know I am cat, until the next midnight returns me." Ira's nursing instincts stirred. This was a patient explaining symptoms, a man trapped in a cycle of loss and rediscovery. "How long have you been cursed?" 317 years this October. The number staggered her. Before electricity, before antibiotics, before the world had shrunk to the size of a phone screen. He'd been alive when the Tudors were still recent memory, when Wales was even more isolated from the wider world than it was now. "What did you do?" she asked. "To deserve 3 centuries of this?" His jaw tightened. "I loved someone I shouldn't have." The story came slowly, pulled from him like splinters from a wound. Anurin had been born in 1685, youngest son of a minor Welsh nobleman whose estate bordered the Black Mountains. Bright, curious, he'd studied with tutors who taught him Latin and mathematics, philosophy and poetry. At 26, he'd fallen in love with Isolde, daughter of a neighboring family, a girl with hair like spun gold and a laugh that could charm birds from trees. They'd planned to marry. Her father had approved the match, but Isolde had another suitor, Murig, ap Rhys, a man who claimed descent from the old blood, the families who'd held Wales before the Norman conquest. Murig practiced the old ways, studied texts that dated back to the Druids, and when Isolde chose Anurin over him, he'd taken it as a betrayal worthy of punishment. "He came to me the night before the wedding," Anurin said, his voice distant with memory. "Offered me a choice. Renounce Isolde, or face consequences I couldn't imagine. I was young, arrogant. I told him to go to hell. So he cursed you. He killed me first, a blade through the heart in my own bedroom. I died watching the moon through my window, wondering why it hurt less than I'd expected." His hand drifted to his chest, fingers pressing against the place where a scar might have been. But Murig was a necromancer as well as a scholar. He brought me back not as I was, but as something caught between life and death. Vampire, he called it. Grachdu, the dark one who feeds on blood. The scent of old books, and older magic seemed to fill the room. Though Ira knew it was only her imagination, she pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, suddenly cold. And the cat? His final cruelty? I could not hide what I'd become, the hunger, the fangs, the way sunlight burned like acid on my skin. Isolde would see me and recoil in horror. So Murig added a second curse. Each dawn, I would forget my human form, become an animal until midnight returned my mind. Helpless, trapped, unable to explain or defend myself. What happened to Isolde? Pain crashed across his features like a wave breaking on rocks. She married Murig 6 months later. I was already long gone by then, fled into the mountains to keep from hurting anyone. I heard later she died in childbirth, their first child. Silence settled heavy between them. Outside, the city hummed its electric lullaby, cars and voices, and the perpetual motion of human life. Inside this small flat, 2 broken people sat in lamplight, connected by the strange thread of a curse 3 centuries old. "I'm sorry," Ira said, because there was nothing else to say. "Don't be. It was my pride that brought this upon me. I should have walked away. Let him have his victory." Anurin lifted his gaze to meet hers, and she saw the weight of those 300 years in the amber depths. "But I wanted to believe love was stronger than hatred. I was wrong. Maybe you weren't." The words surprised her as much as him. "You're still here, still fighting to survive despite everything? That's not weakness. It's not strength either. It's stubbornness and fear." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, a posture that made him look more human, more vulnerable. "I am tired, Aira. So desperately tired. I have worn fur and walked on 4 legs for longer than I wore my own skin. I have forgotten my mother's face, my father's voice, everything except this curse that defines me. Then why not end it? If you're truly immortal, there must be ways. I've tried." The confession came flat, emotionless. Silver through the heart. Drowning, starvation. The curse won't allow it. I cannot die, but I cannot truly live. I am caught, like a fly in amber, perfectly preserved in my own damnation. Aira's throat tightened. She knew that particular darkness, the weight of wanting oblivion because existence had become unbearable. She'd felt it in the weeks after Gwenllian's death, standing on her balcony and wondering how easy it would be to just step. "There has to be a way to break it," she said firmly. "Curses aren't permanent, not in the old stories. The old stories are lies we tell children to help them sleep." But even as he spoke, something flickered in his expression, hope, fragile as moth wings. "Or they're truths we've forgotten how to read." She stood, restless energy driving her to pace. "You said Murig was a necromancer, that he used old magic. Magic has rules, doesn't it? Prices and balances and true love's kiss?" His laugh was bitter. "I've been kissed by many people over 3 centuries, Aira. Lovers who thought they could save me, fools who thought themselves brave enough to love a monster. None of it mattered. Maybe because it wasn't about love. Maybe it was about something else entirely." He watched her pace, curiosity replacing some of the exhaustion in his face. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking you need a researcher, not a romantic. Someone who can dig through archives and folklore and figure out what specific conditions Murig built into his curse." She stopped in front of him, surprised by her own conviction. "I'm a nurse. I solve problems. I find solutions. And you're just another patient with a very unusual condition. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious." She crossed her arms, the gesture defensive but her voice steady. "I have 12 hours every night with someone who lived through 3 centuries of history. Someone who knows magic exists, who can tell me what to look for. You have me someone with access to university archives, medical journals, historical societies. Between us, we can find answers. And if we don't, if this is simply my eternal fate, then at least you'll have tried everything. At least you won't die or continue not dying wondering if there was something you missed." Anurin rose slowly, unfolding to his full height, and for a moment, the predator showed through the man's face, the vampire who'd survived 3 centuries on blood and desperation. She should have been afraid. Every instinct should have been screaming at her to retreat, but she'd spent months drowning in grief. And this impossible mystery, this strange broken man turned cat felt like the first time she'd been able to breathe since Gwenllian died. "Why?" he asked softly. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "Because I know what it's like to be trapped in something you can't escape. Because my sister would have believed in you immediately. Because..." She swallowed hard. "Because I need a reason to get up in the morning that isn't just going through the motions until I die." Something shifted in his expression, the hardness softening into something almost like tenderness. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both." She held out her hand, formal as a contract. Partners? He stared at her hand for a long moment, and she could see him warring with hope and fear, 3 centuries of disappointment battling against this fragile possibility she offered. Then he took her hand in his. His skin was cold as marble, but his grip was careful, measured to human strength. Partners, he agreed. Though I warn you, I'm poor company. I've forgotten how to be anything but bitter. Lucky for you, I've forgotten how to be anything but sad. We'll balance each other out. His laugh was startled, genuine. You're very strange, Era. You're a 300-year-old vampire who turns into a cat at dawn. I think strange is our new normal. The clock ticked toward 1 a.m. They had 11 hours left before sunrise stole him away again. 11 hours to begin unraveling a mystery that had outlasted empires and wars, and the march of progress that had turned his world into something unrecognizable. Ira released his hand and moved to her laptop, already mentally cataloging resources. Welsh folklore databases, university libraries, historical records from the late 17th century. Somewhere in all that information, there had to be a thread they could pull, a weakness in Murig's curse they could exploit. Tell me everything, she said, fingers poised over the keyboard. Every detail you remember about the night he cursed you, every word he spoke, every gesture he made. We'll start there. Anurin settled back into the armchair, his ancient eyes bright with something she recognized from her nursing work, the desperate, fragile hope of a patient who'd been told there might, against all odds, be a cure. And as the night deepened around them, as the city slept and the moon traced its arc across the sky, a nurse who'd lost her sister, and a vampire who'd lost everything, began the work of seeking salvation in words and memory, and the stubborn refusal to accept that some prisons were forever. Chapter 3, The Blood Accord. The week that followed established a rhythm as strange as it was compelling. Era returned to work, pulling her usual night shifts at the hospital, but her mind remained divided. Half of her focused on administering medications, checking vitals, comforting frightened patients. The other half cataloged questions to ask Anurin, leads to pursue, archives to search during her precious days off. During daylight hours, Bran was simply a cat, affectionate but independent, curling on her lap while she read, watching birds through the window with predatory intensity. She found herself talking to him anyway, explaining her research out loud as if his feline ears could process the information for his human mind to access later. They couldn't. She knew. He'd told her the separation was complete. But it helped her think. At midnight, the transformation brought Anurin back, and they worked until dawn chased him away again. He possessed a scholar's mind, sharp despite 3 centuries of forced forgetting, able to recall details from his original life with crystalline clarity. The curse, it seemed, had frozen not just his body but his memories. Nothing from his human years ever degraded or faded. An unintended mercy, he'd said one night, bitter. Murig wanted me to remember everything I'd lost, every perfect detail, preserved forever. By Friday, Ira had compiled a list of 37 curse-breaking methods from Welsh folklore. Most involved true love's kiss, which Anurin had already confirmed didn't work. Others required gathering impossible ingredients. Moonlight caught in silver nets. Water from a well that didn't exist. The tears of a willing sacrifice. This one's interesting, she said on their 5th night together, tapping her laptop screen. Breaking a curse requires undoing the conditions that created it. If Murig cursed you for choosing Isolde, then the opposite choice might, renouncing love entirely? Anurin's laugh was sharp. I've lived 3 centuries alone, Era. If that could break the curse, I'd be free already. Not renouncing love, choosing differently. She pulled up the scanned manuscript she'd found in Cardiff University's digital archives. This text is from 1702, written by a Welsh monk documenting local magical practices. He describes a similar curse punishment for an unwanted marriage proposal. The victim escaped by accepting the curse giver's original terms, but on their own timeline. Years later, after the curse giver had forgotten his anger, Murig is 300 years dead. His curse isn't. She met Anurin's gaze across the cluttered coffee table. Magic has momentum. It continues even after the caster dies, following the rules they established. If we can figure out what would satisfy those original terms, I would have to accept his judgment, renounce Isolde retroactively, admit he was right to punish me. His voice went cold. I won't. Even if it means freedom? Even then. The stubbornness in his expression frustrated and impressed her in equal measure. 300 years hadn't broken his pride. hadn't made him willing to compromise the core of who he'd been. She understood that impulse grief had taught her that some principles were worth suffering for, but it also meant they were at an impasse. "Tell me about the feeding," she said instead, switching topics. "You said you're a vampire. Do you need blood?" He'd been avoiding this question all week, she'd noticed, deflecting whenever she pressed, changing the subject. Now, trapped by direct inquiry, he went very still. "Yes. How often?" "As Anarin. Every night, ideally. I can survive on less, but the hunger becomes difficult." "And as Bran?" "Mice. Birds. Whatever the cat can catch." He spoke carefully, as if each word cost him. The curse provides for basic survival in both forms, but the vampire's hunger is different from the cat's. Stronger, more demanding. Era's pulse quickened fear or fascination. She couldn't tell. "What happens if you don't feed?" "I weaken, lose control. The monster surfaces." His hands clenched on the chair arms. "I haven't hurt anyone in a century, Era. I learned discipline, learned to hunt animals instead of humans. But the hunger never truly leaves. It's always there, whispering." She thought of her patients, the ones battling addictions or chronic pain, fighting battles against their own bodies every day. Anurin's curse was physical as much as magical, a condition requiring management, not just a mystical puzzle to solve. "When did you last feed?" 3 days ago. "A fox, in the park after midnight." "That's not enough, is it?" His silence was answer enough. Era stood, crossed to the kitchen, returned with a paring knife and a ceramic bowl. She'd been considering this since their second night together, weighing risks against her growing certainty that Anarin wouldn't harm her. Not because he couldn't, the power in him was palpable, a coiled strength that could snap her neck with trivial ease, but because he'd spent centuries proving he wouldn't. "What are you doing?" Wariness crept into his voice. "Solving a problem." She sat across from him, rolled up her sleeve, pressed the knife to her forearm. "You need blood. I have blood. This is a practical solution." "No." The word came sharp as a blade. He was on his feet in an instant, moving with inhuman speed to catch her wrist before she could cut. "Absolutely not. Why not? I donate blood regularly. I know my limits. A pint won't hurt me. This is different." His grip on her wrist was gentle but immovable. Blood given freely, blood drunk directly, it creates a bond. Magical, unbreakable. "You would be tied to me, Era. Your dreams, your thoughts, pieces of yourself would bleed into mine. I won't do that to you." "What if I'm willing?" "You don't understand what you're offering." "Then explain it to me." She didn't pull away, let him hold her wrist, felt the coolness of his skin against hers. "Tell me what happens." He closed his eyes, and she saw the war playing out behind his expression, hunger and honor, desire and disgust. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Blood is memory. Blood is truth. When I drink from someone freely given, I taste everything they are: joy and sorrow, hope and fear, the essential core of their being. And they taste mine in return, though more faintly. You would know me, Ira. Not as I present myself, but as I truly am. 3 centuries of loneliness and rage and grief. No filters, no lies. Maybe that's what we need. No lies. You say that now, but you haven't seen. I've seen you transform from cat to man and back again every night for a week. I've seen you remember being human and then forget. I've seen you cry when you think I'm not watching." She turned her hand in his grip, laced their fingers together. "Show me who you are. Let me decide if I can bear it. This is madness. This whole situation is madness. But we're in it together, aren't we? Partners." The word broke something in him. She felt it in the way his grip tightened fractionally, in the sharp breath he drew. Partners, equals. Not prey. Not master and servant. Not the lonely dynamic he'd known for centuries. "If we do this," he said slowly, "you must understand the terms. Blood given creates obligation, protection. I would be bound to keep you safe, and you would be bound to trust me. Ancient magic doesn't recognize partial commitments. I already trust you. You've had a dozen chances to hurt me. Trust and magical binding aren't the same thing. Close enough." She retrieved the knife from where she'd set it on the table, offered it to him. "Do it properly, then. Whatever ritual the curse requires, make it official." He stared at the knife, at her, at their joined hands. The clock ticked toward 2 a.m. Outside, rain began to fall, soft percussion against the windows. You're certain? I'm certain I want to help you. I'm certain you need to feed. I'm certain that if we're going to break this curse, we need to trust each other completely. She smiled, trying for levity. Plus, I'm curious what vampire bonding feels like. Professional interest. You're insane, probably, but you're still holding my hand. His laugh was startled, almost painful. Then his expression shifted, became formal, ancient. He released her hand and knelt before her, a gesture from another era, when supplicants approached their lords with bent knees and bowed heads. Era of the gentle hands and grieving heart, he said, and his voice carried weight beyond mere words. I ask permission to drink your blood, to share your strength, to bind myself to your service and protection. Do you grant this freely, without coercion or fear? The air thickened. She felt the magic gathering, invisible but undeniable, waiting for her answer to give it shape. I grant it freely, she said, and meant it. Then, by blood and moonlight, by ancient compact and modern mercy, I accept your gift. He took the knife, made a small precise cut along his palm, then did the same to hers. Their blood welled dark against pale skin. He pressed their palms together, and the magic ignited. Era gasped. It felt like falling and flying simultaneously, like every nerve in her body had caught fire. She could feel a neuron in her mind, not thoughts exactly, but impressions, emotions, the vast, terrible weight of his existence crashing against her consciousness. Loneliness so profound it had its own gravity. Hunger that gnawed like physical pain. But underneath, threaded through everything, a stubborn spark of hope he'd hidden even from himself. And he could feel her too. She knew it by the way he flinched, by the grief that rose in her throat like a tide. He tasted her sorrow over Gwenllian, her guilt at surviving when her sister hadn't, the empty space where her future used to live. I'm sorry, he whispered, and she didn't know if he was apologizing for drinking or for understanding. Don't be. He lifted their joined hands to his mouth, sealed his lips over the cut on her palm. The sensation was intimate beyond anything sexual, a sharing so complete it dissolved boundaries between self and other. She felt his hunger ease, felt strength flow from her into him, felt the curse itself notice and shift, just slightly, a loosening of chains she hadn't known were there. When he pulled away, his eyes were bright gold, inhuman and beautiful. It's done, he said roughly. The bond is sealed. I am yours, Era, for whatever that's worth. And I'm yours? In a manner of speaking. You can call me if you need me, even during daylight. The cat will come to you. It's not much, but it's everything. She examined her palm, where the cut had already stopped bleeding, sealed by magic or vampire saliva or some combination of both. I can feel you, in the back of my mind, like a presence. It fades with distance and time. But yes, we're connected now. They sat in silence for a long moment, both processing what they'd just done. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the roof, and Era found herself thinking of old stories, where blood oaths bound warriors and kings, where sacrifice created unbreakable ties. There's something else, Anurin said quietly. The bond. It gives me a chance I haven't had before. Access to your time, your era. I've been trapped in midnight hours, unable to affect the daylight world. But through you, I might be able to reach things I couldn't before. Research, resources, magic that requires human action. You want to use the bond to work on breaking the curse during the day? If you're willing. I hate asking, you've already given so much. Of course I'm willing. That's the whole point. She flexed her hand, testing the invisible connection between them. What do you need? There's a library. In Abergavenny, at the old Church of Street. Mary. They have texts dating back to the 15th century, chronicles kept by monks who documented magical practices. I've never been able to access them. I can't travel far from wherever I wake as Bran, and I can't enter consecrated ground. His gaze met hers, urgent. But you could. If the bond is strong enough, I could guide you to the right texts, help you understand what you're reading. Like having a research assistant in my head. Precisely. Era grinned, despite the strangeness, despite the pull of exhaustion starting to creep over her from the blood loss. When do we start? Tomorrow. If you're recovered enough. I know I'm fine. I'll eat iron-rich foods. Take it easy at work. I've dealt with worse. She stood, swayed slightly, caught herself on the chair back. Okay, maybe some orange juice first. He was at her side instantly, steadying her with cool hands. You should rest. I've been selfish, keeping you up talking when you need sleep. Partners help each other. That includes letting me decide my own limits. Stubborn, hypocritical. They smiled at each other, and Ira felt the absurdity of it all standing in her tiny flat at 2 a.m, blood-bonded to a cursed vampire who spent half his existence as a cat, planning a research trip to a medieval library to break 300-year-old magic. Gwenllian would have loved every minute of it. Go rest, Anurin said gently. I'll clean up, make sure you have everything you need. And Ira? Yes? Thank you. For seeing me. For choosing to help. I don't have words for what that means. She squeezed his arm, his skin still cold, but familiar now, not frightening, and headed for bed. Behind her, she heard him moving through the flat with careful quiet, this ancient creature trying so hard not to disturb her rest. As she drifted toward sleep, she felt him in her mind, a steady presence, watchful and protective. The loneliness had receded slightly, she noticed. Not gone, perhaps never gone, but eased. She'd given him blood and gotten connection in return. Fair trade, she thought, and let the darkness take her. Chapter 4. The Archives of Street. Mary. The church stood at the edge of Abergavenny like a sentinel from another age, its stone walls weathered by centuries of Welsh rain. Ira parked her car in the small lot behind the rectory, gathering her courage with her notebook and research credentials. She'd called ahead, explaining she was a nurse researching historical medical practices, not entirely a lie, though she'd omitted the part about vampire curses. The rector, a kind-voiced man named Father Reese, had seemed delighted to grant her access to their archives. We don't get many visitors interested in the old texts, he'd said. Most people prefer the tourist attractions. Now, standing before the heavy wooden doors, Ira felt Anurin stir in the back of her mind. The bond had been quiet all day while she slept and prepared, just a gentle warmth that let her know he was still there. Still Bran, still waiting for midnight to restore his voice. But entering consecrated ground made the connection sharpen, clarify. She felt his awareness focus on her like a beam of light. Careful. His presence seemed to whisper, though she heard no actual words. The wards here are old. Strong. She'd asked him about this, how the bond worked during daylight, whether he could truly communicate or just observe. He'd explained it was more like instinct. Impressions flowing through the connection rather than clear thought. The cat's mind was too simple to form words, but his human consciousness, trapped beneath fur and whiskers, could push feelings, urgings, warnings. Ira opened the door. The church interior was beautiful in its austerity. High vaulted ceilings, narrow windows that filtered sunlight into colored pools, wooden pews worn smooth by centuries of faithful bodies. The air smelled of old stone and candle wax, incense and thyme. Father Reese emerged from a side door, smiling. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 40, with graying hair and the comfortable manner of someone who'd found his calling early and never doubted it. You must be Ira. Welcome to Street. Mary's. They shook hands, his grip warm and solid. If he noticed anything strange about her, any trace of the vampire bond, he gave no sign. Thank you for allowing me access. I promise to be careful with the texts. I appreciate that. Some of them are quite fragile. He led her through the nave toward a door at the back. We've kept records here since 1450, though many were lost to fire in the 18th century. What's left is in the crypt library. Down. Narrow stone steps they went, into coolness and darkness punctuated by electric lights. A modern addition. Clearly. The crypt opened into a series of small rooms, and one held floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with books, scrolls, leather-bound journals whose spines cracked with age. I'll leave you to it, Father Reese said. Please don't hesitate to ask if you need anything, and do be gentle, some of these are irreplaceable. He left her alone with centuries of accumulated knowledge. Ira set down her bag, pulled out her laptop and camera, and reached for the bond. Anurin? Can you sense the books? A pulse of affirmation. Then, stronger, urgency, direction. She followed the pull to the far corner, where a series of journals sat bound in dark leather. Dates were stamped in fading gold. 1685, 1686, 1687. Her breath caught. The years of Anurin's transformation. She pulled down the 1685 volume carefully, carried it to the reading table someone had thoughtfully provided. The pages were brittle but legible, written in a cramped hand that mixed Welsh and Latin. "Here," the bond whispered. "September." She turned pages until she found it. September 23rd, 1685. The entry was written by Brother Caddock, the monastery's historian, and it detailed local events with meticulous care. Harvest reports, a birth in the village, a dispute over land boundaries, and then, a great darkness has come to the manor of Aneurin ap Gruffydd. The young lord was to wed Isolde Furch Morgan this week, but tragedy struck. He was found dead in his chamber, murdered by person or persons unknown. The wedding is postponed indefinitely. May God have mercy on his soul. Ira's hands trembled as she photographed the page. Dead. The official record called him dead, because by the time anyone found him, he'd already been transformed. "Keep going," Aneurin urged. The next entry, dated September 25th. Strange reports from the manor. The Lord's body has vanished from the chapel where it lay in state. Some say he rose and fled into the night. Others claim it was resurrection most unholy. Murrig ap Rhys has taken charge of the investigation. And September 30th. The betrothal is broken. Lady Isolde has retired to her family estate. Murrig ap Rhys is seen often at the manor, searching for something. He will not say what. The servants whisper of dark magic, of creatures seen in the moonlight. I fear for this parish. The entries continued sporadically through October, November, December. Brother Caddock documented sightings of a large black cat in the area, attacks on livestock that left animals drained of blood, strange lights in the woods. Then, in January of 1686, a final note. Murrig ap Rhys has departed for London. The darkness seems to have departed with him. Whatever haunted our parish has gone, praise God. But Eira noticed what Brother Caddock hadn't. The attacks didn't stop. They simply became less frequent, more careful. Every few weeks, another mention of mysterious livestock deaths. Always the same pattern, blood drained, no other injuries. Aneurin learning to survive, learning to hide. Is there anything about how Murrig created the curse? She asked the bond. Resistance, frustration, different book, older. She returned the journal carefully, followed the pull toward another shelf. These books were even more ancient, bound in materials she couldn't identify. One had a lock, corroded with age but still intact. That one, Father Rhys? She called up the stairs. He appeared moments later. Found something interesting? This book. Do you have the key? His expression shifted, became wary. That's one of the restricted texts. Magical practices, documented by monks who were, let's say, more open-minded than the church preferred. I can't let you access it without special permission. Eira thought quickly. I'm researching historical medical practices that were considered magical. Herbal remedies, treatments that seemed supernatural but had basis in chemistry. This text might have exactly what I need. He hesitated, clearly torn between academic interest and institutional caution. Please, she added, I'm trying to help someone. A patient with an unusual condition. This could be the key to understanding it. Not a lie, not even an exaggeration. Father Rhys sighed. 1 hour, and I'll need to supervise. Some of these texts contain practices the church still considers dangerous. Fair enough. He produced a key from somewhere in his robes. Unlocked the book, but stayed in the room as she opened it. The pages inside were covered in dense Latin, illustrated with diagrams that made her skin crawl. Pentagrams, symbols she didn't recognize, instructions for rituals that involved blood and bone and moonlight. There, Aneurin's presence spiked with recognition. Page 47. She turned carefully to the indicated page and found a detailed description of a transformation curse. The Latin was archaic, difficult, but she could make out the key. Components. To bind a soul between forms, one must first sever the natural connection between spirit and flesh through death. Upon resurrection, the soul is malleable, receptive to new constraints. The curse giver speaks their terms at the moment of rebirth, and the magic seals them into the victim's very essence. Instructions followed. The specific herbs needed, the phase of moon, the words to speak. And at the bottom, a note, in different handwriting, added later. This curse cannot be broken by force or wish. Only by fulfilling the original terms or by the curse giver's willing release can the victim be freed. If the curse giver dies, The magic persists according to its established pattern until the heat death of the universe or the victim's true death, whichever comes first. Era's heart sank. Murig was 3 centuries dead. There would be no willing release. But fulfilling the original terms. Keep reading, Anurin urged, and she felt desperation in the pull. She photographed the page, turned to the next. More instructions, variations on the curse, warnings about the price of such magic. Then, near the end of the section, a paragraph that made her breath stop. If the victim can convince another soul to willingly share their fate, to become likewise bound between forms, to split themselves as punishment for the same transgression, the curse recognizes the terms as fulfilled. The original victim may choose which form to keep permanently, while the new victim assumes the dual burden. This is considered the cruelest escape, for it damns another to save oneself. Era read it again, and again. Someone could take Anurin's place, willingly, and he would be free. No, came the immediate response through the bond. Absolutely not. She ignored him, photographed the page, continued reading. There had to be another way. Some variation, some loophole. Is everything all right? Father Reese asked. You've gone quite pale. Just processing. This is intense material. Indeed. The monks who kept these records walked a fine line between documenting evil and practicing it. We preserve them as warnings, not instructions. She managed a smile. I understand. Just a few more pages? He nodded, though he watched her more carefully now. The bond thrummed with anxiety as she continued through the text. More curse variations, more warnings, descriptions of other transformations, man to wolf, woman to swan, child to shadow. But nothing else about breaking the specific curse that bound Anurin, until the very last page of the section, where someone Brother Caddock again, she thought. Recognizing the handwriting from the journals, had added a note. I have seen the creature that was once Anurin ap Gruffydd. It lives in the woods beyond the parish, neither fully alive nor properly dead. Murig ap Rhys boasted before leaving that he had created the perfect punishment, a curse that could only be broken by an act of selfless love so pure it defied human nature. He claimed no one would ever love the monster enough to share its fate, and thus Anurin would suffer alone until the stars went dark. God forgive us all for what we have allowed. Era closed the book carefully, mind racing. Selfless love. Willing sacrifice. Someone would have to choose to become like Anurin, split between forms, cursed to transform, trapped in the same cycle of forgetting and remembering. They would have to do it knowing exactly what it meant, with full understanding of the cost. And in accepting that fate willingly, for love of him, they would break the original curse's terms. Murig had designed it assuming no one could love Anurin enough to damn themselves for his freedom, but Murig hadn't anticipated someone like Era. Don't, Anurin's presence practically shouted in her mind. Don't even think it. She thanked Father Reese, packed up her materials, and drove home in silence. The bond hummed with distress the entire way, but she couldn't respond, couldn't explain. Not yet. Not until she'd thought this through properly. By the time she reached her flat, the sun was setting. Bran sat on the windowsill, tail lashing, amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that went beyond feline instinct. She could feel Anurin beneath the cat's form, screaming at her through the bond, begging her to abandon whatever plan was forming in her mind. But she'd lost her sister to random chance, to a driver who'd made a careless choice. She'd spent 3 months drowning in the helplessness of grief, unable to change anything, unable to save anyone. Here, finally, was a choice she could make. A sacrifice that meant something. She just had to wait for midnight, when Anurin could speak properly. Then they would have their first real fight. Chapter 5. The Choice. Anurin transformed at midnight with barely controlled fury. Don't, he said the instant his human form solidified. Whatever you're planning, Era, don't. She sat on the sofa, arms crossed, expression calm despite the storm building in the room. You don't know what I'm planning. I felt you reading that page. I felt your determination, your martyrdom. He paced the small living room like a caged animal, all predatory grace and desperate energy. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. It's not your choice to make. The hell it isn't. We're bonded. Your pain is mine. Your fate is mine. Exactly. Which means my choices are mine too. She stood to face him, matched his intensity with her own. You said the bond creates obligation, protection. Well, I'm protecting you. This is how I do it. By damning yourself? By splitting your soul between forms? Becoming what I am? His voice rose. Do you have any idea what that means? The hunger, the forgetting, the endless cycle of losing yourself twice a day? I've lived it for 300 years, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Then it's good I'm not your enemy. Era, listen to me. She closed the distance between them, grabbed his arms when he tried to turn away. My sister died. I couldn't stop it, couldn't save her, couldn't do anything but watch her casket sink into the ground and know that she was gone forever. Do you understand what that does to a person? The helplessness? Yes, he said quietly. I do. But that doesn't mean, here is something I can do. Someone I can save. A choice I can make that matters. Her grip tightened. You want to talk about living with the curse? I've been living with survivor's guilt for 3 months. I've been asking myself why I'm still here when she's not. Maybe this is why. Maybe I survived so I could help you. Or maybe you're just looking for a way to punish yourself that feels noble. His words cut, intentionally cruel. Sacrificing yourself for a monster isn't healing, Era. It's just a different kind of self-destruction. She flinched but didn't back down. You don't get to decide what heals me. And you don't get to decide you're expendable. They stood locked together, breathing hard, both trembling with emotion too large for the small space to contain. Outside, the city continued its indifferent existence. Cars and lights, and people who had no idea that in this ordinary flat, 2 people were fighting over who got to be damned. Era spoke first, softer now. Tell me you don't want to be free. Look me in the eyes and tell me you wouldn't take this chance if it was offered. Not at this cost. Why not? I'm not Isolde. I'm not some innocent you'd be corrupting. I'm a grown woman making an informed choice. You're grieving and desperate and so are you. The words burst out of her. You've been grieving for 300 years. You're so desperate for freedom you can taste it. Don't pretend this is about protecting me when it's really about your pride, your guilt, your inability to accept that someone might actually choose to help you. Silence crashed down between them. Anurin's expression cycled through anger, hurt, recognition. He pulled away from her, moved to the window, pressed his forehead against the cool glass. I don't want to be the reason someone else suffers, he said finally. I've carried enough guilt, Era. I can't carry yours too. You wouldn't have to. It would be my choice. My responsibility. She approached carefully, like she was gentling a spooked horse. The text said the curse recognizes willing sacrifice. That means I have to choose it freely, fully understanding what it means. No tricks, no coercion, just me deciding that your freedom is worth my transformation. Why? His voice broke on the word. Why would you do that for me? Because you're not a monster. Because you've spent 3 centuries punishing yourself for loving someone, and that's long enough. Because... She swallowed hard. Because in the weeks we've spent together, you've made me feel less alone than I've felt since Gwenllian died. You listen. You understand. You don't treat me like I'm broken just because I'm grieving. He turned to face her, and she saw tears on his face the first time she'd seen him cry. You are the kindest, bravest, most foolish person I've ever met. I'll take that as a compliment. It's not. It's a warning. But his hand reached for hers, and she took it. Let him lace their fingers together. If you do this, Era, there's no going back. The curse will bind you. You'll transform at dawn and midnight. Forget and remember. Live split between 2 forms. And I don't know if we'll be able to reverse it, even with research. You could be trapped forever. Then I'll be trapped with you. We'll figure it out together. That's not Anurin. She squeezed his hand. I've spent 3 months wishing I could trade places with my sister, wishing I could have died instead of her. This isn't that. This isn't me wanting to die. It's me wanting to live differently, strangely, but alive. With purpose. With you. His control shattered. He pulled her into an embrace so tight she could barely breathe, and she felt him shaking against her. 300 years of isolation cracking open all at once. I don't deserve this, he whispered into her hair. Neither did you deserve the curse. But here we are. They stood holding each other while the clock ticked toward 1 a.m. The bond between them pulsed with emotion too complex to name gratitude and terror, hope and grief, love that wasn't romantic but ran deeper than most romance ever reached. There has to be another way, he said eventually, though the conviction had drained from his voice. Some method we haven't found yet. If there is, we'll find it. But if there isn't? She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. If this is the only option, I need you to let me choose it. Not because you want freedom, though you do. And that's okay, but because you trust me to know my own mind. I don't want you to suffer. I know. I don't want you to suffer either. That's why we're doing this. He searched her face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. She let him see everything. Her determination, her fear, her certainty that this was right, even if it was terrifying. If I agree, he said slowly, we do more research first. We make absolutely certain there's no alternative. And we prepare properly. I'll teach you everything I know about managing the transformation, the hunger, the curse. You won't go into this blind. Deal. And if at any point you change your mind, I won't. But if you do, we stop. No guilt, no pressure. Your choice remains yours. She smiled. You're negotiating like I'm not already committed. I'm negotiating like you're precious to me, and I can't bear to hurt you. The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Not romance, neither of them was ready for that. Might never be ready for that. But something equally powerful. Chosen family, forged in crisis and sealed in blood. You won't hurt me, Era said. We'll hurt together, maybe. Transform together. Figure this out together. But you won't be alone anymore. Neither will I. Stubborn woman. Stubborn vampire. He laughed, watery and genuine, and kissed her forehead with cold lips. We have 5 hours until dawn. Tell me everything you learned at the archives. Show me the photographs. We'll plan this properly, even if it terrifies me. They settled at the table with her laptop, and Era pulled up the images she'd taken. Together, they began the work of understanding exactly what the curse would require, what the transformation would entail, what price they would both pay for his freedom. Outside, the moon traced its path across the sky, indifferent to the choices being made in its light. Inside, a woman who'd lost everything and a man who'd existed too long in nothing began to build something new. Partnership, purpose, a shared fate that would either destroy them or forge them into something stronger than either had been. Alone, the bond hummed between them, copper and moonlight and the strange alchemy of two wounded souls choosing to heal each other. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Chapter 6. The Lineage Revealed. 3 nights later, Era woke from a dream she couldn't quite remember, fragments of it clinging like cobwebs. A woman's voice singing in Welsh, hands stained with herbs, moonlight through ancient trees. Bran was sitting on her chest, staring at her with those two intelligent eyes. You know something, she told him, though she knew the cat couldn't answer. Don't you? He bumped his head against her chin, purring, then leaped off the bed and trotted to her desk where she'd left her research materials spread out. With deliberate care, he knocked one particular book onto the floor. It was her grandmother's journal. Era had brought it from storage last week, hoping family history might offer some insight into Welsh magical traditions. Her grandmother, Olwen, had been a midwife in the valleys, known for her herbal remedies and her uncanny ability to predict difficult births before any medical sign appeared. A touch of the old blood? Era's mother used to say dismissively. Just superstition dressed up as wisdom. But Gwenllian had believed, had made Era promise to keep the journal safe, insisting it contained important knowledge. Now Bran sat beside the fallen book, one paw resting on the cover. Era picked it up, carried it back to bed. The entries were dated from the 1952 through the early 2000s, written in Welsh with occasional English phrases. She'd skimmed it before, looking for magical references, but found mostly birth records and remedy recipes. This time, guided by instinct, or by Aneurin working through Bran, she flipped to the back, where loose pages had been tucked into the binding. Her grandmother's handwriting, but older, more formal. For my granddaughter Ira, should she ever need to know her true heritage. Ira's heart hammered as she read. The pages detailed her family lineage, traced back through centuries of Welsh women, midwives, healers, cunning women who'd served their communities with herb lore and practical magic. And woven through the generations, a gift, the ability to sense death approaching, to ease transitions, to communicate with those caught between life and what came after. We are threshold guardians, Olwen had written, born with one foot in each world. The living know us as healers, the dead know us as guides. This gift runs true in the female line, though it sometimes skips a generation. It had skipped Ira's mother, but Gwenllian had shown signs. Her grandmother noted an uncanny empathy, an ability to calm even the most distressed patients. And Era was born during the eclipse, when boundaries thin. She will be the strongest of our line if she chooses to accept her heritage. She will see what others cannot, touch what others fear. She will stand between the living and the dead and fear neither. Her hands trembled, holding the pages. All those times she'd just known a patient was about to crash before the monitors showed it. The way she could sense when someone was dying, could feel their distress like a physical weight. She'd attributed it to nursing experience, pattern recognition, professional instinct. But it was magic, had always been magic. Bran meowed, sharp and insistent, pulling her attention back to the journal. She turned the page and found her grandmother's final entry, dated just weeks before she died. The vampire Anurin ap Gruffy'd lives still, trapped by Mirig ap Rhys's curse. I have tried to find him, to offer help, but he hides well and trusts no one. If you are reading this, Era, it means you have found him instead, or he has found you. Know this. Your gift makes you uniquely suited to break his curse. Threshold guardians can walk between forms, between states of being, without losing themselves. Where others would be destroyed by transformation magic, you would adapt, integrate, survive. If you choose to help him, and it must be a choice, freely made, your heritage will protect you. The curse will bind you, yes, but it cannot break you. You are already both living and liminal. Becoming beast and woman simply adds another duality to your nature. Trust your blood, child. Trust your heart. And know that I am proud of you. Whatever you decide. Era read the words 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her grandmother had known, had understood the path Era would walk decades before she'd walked it, had left this message, this permission, this confirmation that what she planned to do wasn't madness or martyrdom. It was destiny, heritage. The magic in her blood recognizing the magic in Anurin's curse and offering a solution. She looked at Bran. Did you know? Did you sense what I was? He blinked slowly, cat language for yes, and she wondered how much of Anurin's consciousness remained, aware during the day, trapped beneath fur and instinct, enough to guide her to this revelation, clearly, enough to help even when he couldn't speak. The hours until midnight crawled past. Era reread her grandmother's words, researched threshold guardians in what texts she could find online, let the truth settle into her bones. She wasn't sacrificing herself to save Anurin. She was stepping into her birthright, using gifts she'd inherited from generations of wise women who'd walked between worlds and survived. The curse wouldn't destroy her. It would simply make her more of what she already was. When Anurin transformed, she was waiting with the journal open, her grandmother's words ready to share. I need to tell you something, they said simultaneously, then stopped, startled. You first, Era offered. Anurin ran a hand through his hair, agitated. I've been thinking as Bran, the consciousness that remains, and I remembered something. The night Mirig cursed me, he said something I'd forgotten. He said the curse could only bind someone with mortal life unmarked by magic. I thought he meant anyone human. But what if it was more specific? What if he built in a protection, ensured that only purely mortal people could be trapped? Then I'm not purely mortal, Era finished, and handed him the journal. Read. She watched emotions play across his face as he absorbed her grandmother's revelations. Shock, understanding, hope, fear. When he finished, he set the journal down carefully and stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. A threshold guardian. You're liminal by nature. Apparently, though I didn't know it until tonight. The bond, he said slowly. That's why it took so easily, so strongly. Blood magic recognizes blood magic. Your gift called to my curse. And my gift means I can survive transformation. Better than survive, adapt to it. She moved to sit beside him. My grandmother knew, Anurin. She knew I would find you. I knew I would choose this. She gave me permission. But the cost is lighter for me than it would be for anyone else. I'm already split between worlds, already comfortable with dualities. Being woman and animal, living in day and night, existing between states. That's just more of what I already am. He closed his eyes, and she felt the war raging inside him through the bond. Hope fighting guilt, desire battling honor, 300 years of loneliness crashing against the possibility of freedom. If we do this, he said finally, if you truly take on the curse, you need to know exactly what you're choosing. The hunger isn't just for blood, it's for connection, for warmth, for everything the curse denies. You'll feel it gnawing at you, whispering that you're a monster, that you deserve the isolation. I already feel isolated. Have since Gwenllian died. This is different. This is magical isolation, bound into your very nature. And the transformations. His voice cracked. You'll forget everything of your human life while you're the animal. Every dawn, every midnight, you'll lose yourself completely. I've lived with that for 3 centuries, and I still haven't made peace with it. But you survive it, which means I can too. Aira, she took his cold hands in her warm ones. I know what I'm choosing. A life split between forms, yes. Hunger and isolation, and the constant cycle of forgetting. But also, purpose. Partnership. The chance to use my gifts to help someone who deserves freedom. And maybe, she smiled, maybe the chance to break both our curses eventually. 2 liminal beings working together might find solutions one alone couldn't. You're assuming we'd both stay cursed. The text said the curse recognizes terms as fulfilled when someone willingly shares the fate. It didn't say you'd be immediately freed. We might both transform for a while, until the magic understands that its conditions have been met. Or we might both be trapped, forever. Then we'd better keep researching. He laughed, helpless against her logic, her determination, her absolute refusal to see obstacles as insurmountable. You're going to do this no matter what I say, aren't you? I'm going to do this because of what you've said. Because you've been honest about the cost, respected my choice, taught me everything I need to know. She squeezed his hands. But yes, I'm doing this. When? Tomorrow night. If you're willing to perform the ritual. His breath hitched. So soon? Why wait? You've suffered long enough. And I... She looked at her grandmother's journal, at the legacy of wise women who'd faced the unknown with courage. I want to step into who I'm meant to be. I think this is part of that. And Euron pulled her into an embrace, and she felt him shaking fear or relief or both. Through the bond, emotions flooded. Gratitude so intense it hurt. Terror at what they were about to do. Love that transcended romance into something more. Fundamental. Chosen family. Soul recognition. The bond between 2 people who'd found each other across impossible circumstances and decided to fight together. I'll prepare everything, he said into her hair. The ritual is complex. We'll need specific herbs, moonlight, blood freely given from both of us. And you'll need to speak the words of acceptance 3 times, with full understanding of their weight. I'll be ready. I'll make sure you are. They spent the remaining hours planning. Anurin explained every step of the ritual, made her repeat back the words until she could recite them perfectly in Welsh. They discussed what would happen after how they'd manage 2 transformations instead of 1, whether they'd share forms or split them, what it would mean for their bond. As dawn approached, Aira felt peace settle over her. This was right. Strange, terrifying, but right. Whatever happens, Anurin said as the first light touched the windows. Thank you. For seeing me. For choosing this. For being braver than I ever was. You've survived 3 centuries of a curse meant to destroy you. That's bravery. That's stubbornness. You're teaching me the difference. The sun crested the horizon, and she watched him transform one last time as a solitary curse-bearer. Man to cat, consciousness to instinct, memory to forgetting. Tomorrow, if the ritual worked, she would join him in that dual existence. And together, they would find a way back to wholeness. Or forge a new kind of wholeness from their fractured pieces. Chapter 7. The Ritual of Shared Fate. The moon hung full and heavy in the November sky, turning the small park behind Aira's building into a landscape of silver and shadow. She'd chosen this spot carefully secluded enough for privacy, open enough for moonlight to pour down unobstructed. The ritual required connection to the lunar cycle, Anurin had explained. The same moon that had witnessed his transformation 3 centuries ago would witness hers. She wore simple clothes, jeans, a white shirt, boots she could remove easily. Her hair was unbound, falling past her shoulders the way Anurin had requested something about the magic needing to see her fully, without barriers or disguise. He'd transformed an hour ago, at midnight, and spent the time since preparing. Now he stood in the center of a circle he'd drawn with salt and iron filings, surrounded by bundles of herbs she'd gathered under his instruction. Vervain, yarrow, mugwort, wolfsbane, dangerous plants, liminal plants, the ones that grew in the spaces between safety and poison. Are you certain? He asked for the 5th time. Completely. Once we begin, there's no stopping. The magic will take hold and you're in. She stepped close, cupped his face in her hands. I trust you. I trust my grandmother's wisdom. I trust my own gifts. We're doing this. He nodded, throat working as he swallowed emotion. The ritual was deceptively simple in structure, complex in execution. Era would kneel in the center of the circle, while Anirin spoke the words that would call the curse to witness. She would offer her blood willingly, accept the terms 3 times, and speak her intention clearly for the magic to recognize. Then she would wait while transformation took her. It will hurt, Anirin warned as she settled into the circle. Not physically, but metaphysically. Your soul splitting, your consciousness dividing, like being torn in half and stitched back together wrong. I've delivered babies and held dying patients. I can handle pain. This is different. I know. She met his eyes, steady. I'm ready anyway. He began the invocation in Welsh, words that rang with power accumulated across centuries. The air thickened, pressing down on them like an invisible weight. Era felt the magic gathering, ancient and hungry, curious about this new offering. I call upon the curse laid by Mureg ap Rhys, in the year of our Lord 1685. I call upon the magic that binds Aneurin ap Gruffiad between forms, between states, between life and death. I offer a new bargain, a soul willingly shared, a fate willingly chosen, a punishment willingly embraced. The moonlight intensified, turning everything sharp and crystalline. Era's skin prickled with awareness. She could feel the curse turning its attention to her, assessing, considering. Aneurin knelt across from her, took the ritual knife silver, of course, because transformation magic recognized silver's binding properties, and cut his palm. Blood welled dark against pale skin. Do you, Ira, offer your blood freely to seal this bargain? I do. He made the same cut on her palm. Their blood mixed, and the bond between them flared so bright she gasped. Through it, she felt Aneurin's terror, his hope, his desperate wish that this would work. Do you, Era, accept transformation between forms, forgetting and remembering, the split existence of beast and... I accept. Her voice rang clear. Do you, Ira, choose this fate, understanding all its costs, the hunger, the isolation, the eternal cycle of loss and rediscovery? I choose it. Knowingly, willingly, with full awareness. The magic surged. Era felt it pour into her like lightning through her veins, like ice water in her lungs, like being unmade and remade simultaneously. The threshold guardian gift rose to meet it, her liminal nature wrapping around the curse's intrusion, absorbing rather than resisting. But it still hurt. God, it hurt. She heard herself screaming. Or maybe that was Aneurin screaming. Or maybe it was the magic itself crying out at this unprecedented occurrence. 2 souls bound to one curse, sharing weight never meant to be divided. The world fractured. Era saw through multiple perspectives at once. Herself kneeling in the circle, Aneurin reaching for her. The moon overhead, the grass beneath. The infinite complexity of existence when you stood at the inhead, threshold of everything. Her consciousness split like water finding cracks in stone. Part of her remained human, anchored in Era's identity and memories and sense of self. But another part began to change. Simplify. Sharpen into instincts about hunting, territory, survival. No, she thought desperately. Not yet. I need to stay myself. Understand what's happening. Let it take you. Aneurin's voice came from somewhere distant. Don't fight. The transformation is part of the acceptance. So she stopped fighting. The animal rose inside her. Sleek, powerful, wild. Not cat, she realized with distant surprise, but fox. Red fur and white-tipped tail, sharp teeth and sharper mind. The curse had read her nature and chosen the form that fit. Threshold guardian, trickster, walker between worlds. Fox. The transformation crashed over her like a wave. She felt bones reshaping, muscles realigning, senses exploding into hypersensitivity. The sense of the park became overwhelming, earth and grass and Aneurin's ancient smell of stone and moonlight and preserved time. Then it was done. Era stood on 4 legs, her human consciousness submerged but not gone, not yet. She could still think, still remember, though the thoughts felt slower, filtered through animal perception. How long? She tried to ask, but it came out as a sharp bark. Aneurin knelt before her, human and huge from this perspective. Tears streamed down his face. Until dawn. You'll forget then. Become fully fox until the next sunset. Then Then you'll transform back to human. But the human form will last only until midnight, when the fox returns. Double transformation, double forgetting. The curse has adapted to include you. She wanted to speak, to tell him it was okay. She'd expected this. But her fox mouth couldn't form words, and her human thoughts were already beginning to fade, animal instinct rising to claim dominance. Anurin seemed to understand. He held out his cut palm, let a drop of blood fall to the grass. She approached cautiously, prey drive warring with recognition, and licked the blood from his hand. The bond flared. Through it, she felt his anguish, his gratitude, his promise. I'll protect you. I'll help you learn this. You're not alone. Then her human consciousness slipped away entirely, and she was only fox curious about this strange man who smelled like pack and moon and safety. She circled him once, testing, then darted into the undergrowth. Behind her, Anurin called out, but the fox didn't understand words, only tone, distress, longing, loss. She would return, some instinct promised. This was home, this was pack. But for now, there was night to explore and prey to hunt, and a whole new existence to discover through senses sharper than any she'd possessed before. Anurin watched her go, the red flash of her tail disappearing into darkness, and felt his heart break and heal simultaneously. She'd done it. Actually done it. Era had taken his curse, shared his fate, split herself between forms to buy his freedom. And the magic had accepted. He felt it in the air, in his bones, in the way the curse's weight had subtly shifted. But they were both still cursed, both still transforming. The text had been right. The curse recognized the terms as fulfilled, but it would take time for the magic to adjust, to understand that its conditions had been met, and release them. How much time? Days? Years? Centuries? He didn't know. What he did know, he wasn't alone anymore. Ira had chosen to walk this strange dual existence with him, and whether that doomed them both or saved them both remained to be seen. Dawn was hours away. He gathered the ritual materials, cleaned the circle, and went to wait in Ira's flat for her return. The fox came back at 3 a.m., scratching at the door. He let her in, watched her explore the apartment with animal curiosity, sniffing at familiar objects that held no human meaning for her animal mind. When dawn came, she didn't transform. Anurin's heart sank. The curse had bound her to fox form, not the alternating cycle he'd expected. But at sunset, when he should have remained human until midnight, he felt the pull of transformation, bones cracking, consciousness fracturing, and suddenly he was Bran again, sitting across from a red fox who watched him with intelligent amber eyes. They'd both changed, both been locked into their animal forms. Fear clawed at him, or it would have, if cats felt fear the way humans did. Had they made it worse? Trapped themselves permanently? Then midnight struck, and they transformed together. Anurin stumbled to his feet in human form, disoriented. Across the room, Era gasped, naked and shaking, her red hair wild around pale shoulders. What happened? She managed. The curse adjusted. We're both on the cycle now, sunset to midnight as animals, midnight to dawn as human. Then we lose the day entirely. So we have 6 hours, every night, together. He pulled a blanket from the sofa, wrapped it around her shoulders. She was trembling, he noticed, shock setting in as her human mind processed what her fox consciousness had experienced. I was an animal, she whispered. I forgot everything. I knew only hunting and fear and instinct. I know. I'm sorry. If I could have... No. She gripped the blanket tighter. Don't apologize. This was my choice. I just need a moment to adjust. They sat together in silence, two people freshly transformed, learning what it meant to exist in dual forms. The bond between them hummed with shared experience now. Fox and cat and human all tangled together. Did it work? Era asked finally. Is the curse broken? Not yet, but it's changed. It recognized your sacrifice, adjusted to include you. We're both bound now. He met her eyes. I think it's waiting, testing whether we can survive this together. And if we can, if we prove we're stronger than Murig anticipated, then perhaps it'll let us go. Or perhaps we'll learn to live with it. Together. She leaned against him, exhausted. What's it like, being Bran during the day? I don't remember. You won't either. Soon. The forgetting is complete. He wrapped an arm around her, careful with his strength. But you'll have me. Every night, when we transform back, We'll have each other. 6 hours to be human, to remember, to work on breaking this. 6 hours isn't much. It's more than I've had in 300 years. She smiled, wan but genuine. Then we'll make them count. They spent their remaining hours that night talking through what had happened, how they felt, what they would do next. Research would continue, obviously. They needed to understand why the curse hadn't broken immediately, what further conditions might exist. But for the first time since Murig had cursed him, Anurin felt something he'd thought lost forever. Partnership. Someone who understood exactly what he endured, because she endured it too. Someone who'd chosen him, chosen this, chosen transformation, over abandoning him to his fate. When dawn approached, Era dressed quickly in the clothes she'd left ready. They stood together at the window, watching the sky lighten. I'm scared, she admitted. Of forgetting again. Of losing myself. You won't lose yourself. You'll just set yourself aside for a while. And I promise, when sunset comes and we're animals together, I'll stay close. Bran will protect the fox. How do you know? Because we're bonded. The magic recognizes us as pack. Our animal selves will know each other even when our human selves are sleeping. The sun crested the horizon. They transformed together, Era into fox, Anurin into cat. For a moment, their animal eyes met, and some spark of recognition passed between them. Then the human consciousness submerged, and they were only beasts, settling into sleep side by side as the day brightened outside. When they woke at sunset, the fox and cat explored Era's flat. Together, the cat keeping the fox from knocking over anything too valuable. The fox's energy drawing the cat into playful hunting games. They were adapting, learning, surviving, and at midnight, when they transformed back to human form, Anurin pulled Era into an embrace and whispered, "Thank you, for choosing this, for choosing me." "We chose each other," she corrected. "Now we figure out how to break this thing." But even if they never did, even if they spent eternity transforming together, he knew one truth. He was no longer alone, and that perhaps was its own kind of freedom. Chapter 8. The Intimacy of Shadows. 2 weeks passed in their new rhythm. Sunset to midnight as fox and cat, prowling Era's flat and the park beyond when they dared venture out together. Midnight to dawn as humans, researching, talking, learning to navigate existence with only 6 hours of consciousness a day. Then oblivion during daylight, their human minds submerged while their animal forms slept away. The hours. Era had called into the hospital, claimed a family emergency that required extended leave. Her supervisor had been understanding, compassionate, even, though Era hated lying. But the truth was impossible to explain. She was learning what Anurin had endured for 3 centuries. The constant loss of self, the hunger that gnawed even in human form, the way time fractured when you only experienced a quarter of each day. But she wasn't alone in it. That made all the difference. Tonight, their 14th night of shared curse, they sat in her flat with books and laptops spread between them, chasing down references to dual transformation curses in every archive they could access remotely. "Here," Era said, pointing to a scanned manuscript from the National Library of Wales. 1,720 seconds text on sympathetic magic. It says when 2 souls share a curse meant for one, the magic can't decide how to distribute the burden, so it doubles the suffering instead of halving it. "We noticed," Anurin said dryly. "But there's a footnote," added later, maybe 1800s. She enlarged the image, squinting at the cramped handwriting. "It says if the cursed pair can achieve perfect synchronization, one mind in 2 bodies, one purpose in 2 forms, the curse collapses. It can't sustain itself without a victim to punish, and if the victims have transcended individual suffering through unity, the magic starves and breaks apart." "Exactly." Anurin leaned over her shoulder to read the passage. Himself. She could feel the coolness radiating from him, the way his presence in the bond had strengthened since she'd taken on the curse. They were more connected now, thoughts and emotions bleeding between them even when they didn't intend it. "Perfect synchronization," he murmured. "That's not just working together. That's becoming one entity across 2 forms. The way some pairs describe long marriages, finishing each other's sentences, knowing what the other needs before they ask. But we've only known each other a month. We've also shared blood, soul bonded, and literally split a curse between us. I think we're on an accelerated timeline." She turned to look at him, found his face inches from hers. "Besides, don't you feel it? How our thoughts echo each other sometimes. How I know you're hungry before you say it, and you know I'm scared before I show it? Yes, he admitted. The bond is deepening. Every transformation, every shared moment, it gets stronger. Then maybe that's the key. We don't fight the curse or try to clever our way around it. We lean into the bond, strengthen it until we're so unified the curse can't tell us apart. He pulled back slightly, and she felt his conflict through the bond. That's intimate, Ira. More intimate than marriage, than family. That's surrendering individual identity. Temporarily, to break the curse. We could reclaim ourselves after. Could we, or would we be permanently changed? She considered that. Seriously. Her threshold guardian gifts made her comfortable with dissolution of boundaries, with existing in states between. But Anurin had spent 3 centuries carefully maintaining his sense of self against the curse's erosion. Asking him to voluntarily blur those boundaries, even temporarily, was asking him to trust in a way he'd specifically avoided. What scares you about it? She asked gently. He stood, paced to the window, stared out at the night. I was erased once before. When Murig killed and transformed me, he destroyed who I was and replaced it with this. Existence. I've spent centuries clawing back pieces of my identity, remembering my name, my family, my humanity. The thought of letting that go again, even with you, even to break the curse, feels like dying. Yes. Era joined him at the window, stood close enough that their arms brushed. I understand, and I won't push you toward something that feels like annihilation. We'll find another way. Will we? Or will we just exist like this forever? 6 hours a night, slowly going mad from partial living? You've survived worse. Surviving isn't living. He turned to face her, and in his expression she saw 300 years of weariness competing with fragile hope. But maybe with you it could be what? Living, even in this fractured state, even transforming and forgetting and hungering every day. His hand found hers, laced their fingers together. Before you, I survived because I was too stubborn to quit. Now I want to survive because there's something worth surviving for. Era's throat tightened. We'll find balance. Between maintaining ourselves and achieving unity. We don't have to choose extremes, don't we? The text said. Perfect synchronization. The text was written by someone who never experienced what we're experiencing. Maybe our version of perfection looks different. She squeezed his hand. Maybe it's not about erasing ourselves. Maybe it's about expansion. Becoming more than we were individually by choosing to share space with each other. He stared at her like she'd offered him something precious and dangerous in equal measure. You make it sound simple. It's not, but neither is this. She gestured to the research surrounding them. We've already done impossible things. This is just one more. Before he could respond, hunger spiked through the bond, his hunger, sharp enough to make her gasp. He flinched, tried to pull away, but she held tight to his hand. When did you last feed? 3 nights ago. I'm fine. You're not fine. I can feel it eating at you. I've survived worse. Stop saying that. She pulled him toward the kitchen, where she kept the ceramic bowl and knife ready now. This had become routine. Every few days, she offered her blood to sustain him, and he drank just enough to keep the hunger manageable. You don't have to survive worse anymore. You have me. Ira, sit. He obeyed, though she felt his reluctance through the bond. Guilt, always guilt, that he required this from her. She'd tried explaining it didn't hurt, that her nurse's knowledge let her manage blood loss safely, that she wanted to help. But 3 centuries of isolation had taught him to need nothing from anyone, an unlearning that would take time. She made the familiar cut on her forearm, filled the bowl halfway more than usual, she noticed, because his hunger was worse than he'd admitted. When she offered it, his control cracked, and he pulled her wrist to his mouth instead of drinking from the bowl. The intimacy of it shocked through her. His mouth on her skin, cool lips and sharp teeth, the pull of him drawing blood and life and something deeper through the connection they shared. She felt his hunger ease, felt pleasure spike through him, not sexual exactly, but profound satisfaction, relief so intense it bordered on joy, and she felt her own response. Not fear or disgust, but tenderness, protectiveness, the deep satisfaction of providing something essential to someone she cared for. When he pulled away, his eyes were gold, inhuman, beautiful. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Don't. She touched his face, thumb brushing his lower lip where a drop of her blood still clung. I don't mind. Actually, I think I prefer it this way. It feels more connected. It creates a deeper bond. Blood from the source is always more powerful than blood in a bowl. Good. We need deeper bonds. She smiled at his shocked expression. Remember? Perfect synchronization. We're working toward it. He caught her hand, pressed it to his cheek. His skin was warmer now, flushed with her blood, nearly human temperature. You confuse me, terrify me, give me hope when I thought I'd forgotten what hope felt like. Is that bad? It's everything. They stayed like that, her blood settling into his system, his gratitude pouring through the bond, until the clock ticked toward 3 a.m. and reminded them they had Haas. Only hours left before dawn stole them away again. Show me something, Aira said impulsively. Something from your human life, a memory you've held on to. Anurin hesitated, then led her to the sofa. He took her hands, closed his eyes, and through the bond, sent her an image. A valley in summer, green and gold under bright sun. A manor house, smaller than she'd imagined, but well kept. Gardens bursting with flowers. And in the garden, a young man laughing Anurin as he'd been, alive and whole and unmarked by curse. Beside him, a woman with golden hair and a smile that could break hearts. Isolde. Aira felt his love for her like an old wound, healed but still tender. The joy of that summer day, the innocence of believing in futures that would never come. She was beautiful, Aira said softly. She was. And I loved her the way young men love desperately, certainly, convinced it would last forever. He opened his eyes, met Aira's gaze. But it wasn't real in the way what we have is real. I loved an idea of her. She loved an idea of me. We were children playing at romance. You don't have to diminish it. I'm not. I'm just realizing there are different kinds of love, different depths. His thumb traced circles on her palm. What I felt for Isolde was beautiful and genuine and worth the memory. But what I'm beginning to feel for you is... He stopped, suddenly unsure. Is what? She prompted, heart hammering. Is terrifying, because it's not about romance or attraction or the pretty surface things. It's about recognition. You see the worst parts of me, the monster, the hunger, the 300 years of accumulated darkness, and you don't flinch. You choose to stand in that darkness with me. You do the same for me. You see my grief, my guilt, my reckless tendency to sacrifice myself, and you don't try to fix me. You just stand with me. Is this love? He asked, vulnerable as she'd never heard him. Or is it trauma bonding, curse bonding? I don't know how to tell the difference anymore. Aira thought about that seriously. About her sister, about the hollow months after her death, about how finding Anurin had felt like finding purpose again, about whether what they shared was healthy or just two broken people clinging to each other. I think, she said slowly, that it doesn't matter what we call it. We chose each other. We trust each other. We're becoming more ourselves, not less, because of each other. That's love, isn't it? Even if it's not the kind poets write about. You deserve poetry, romance. Someone who can take you dancing in daylight, who doesn't drain your blood to survive, who doesn't drag you into curses and darkness. I deserve someone who sees me, who values my choices, who trusts me to know my own heart. She shifted closer, until their knees touched. That's you, Anurin. Monster or man, cursed or free. That's you. He kissed her, then not with passion, but with something deeper. Gratitude and recognition and the slow burning warmth of two people discovering they fit together in unexpected ways. When they pulled apart, Aira rested her forehead against his, breathing in his scent of stone and moonlight and her own blood. We're going to break this curse, she said. Together. I believe you. And then we figure out what comes after. What we are without the curse defining us. He smiled, and it reached his eyes for the first time since she'd known him. I'm terrified to find out. But also excited. Me too. The clock chimed 4 a.m., 2 hours until dawn. They spent them in comfortable silence, hands linked, sharing warmth and presence, and the growing certainty that whatever happened next, they wouldn't face it alone. When the sun rose and transformation claimed them, Aira's last human thought was, I choose this. I choose him. I choose us. Then she was Fox, and the cat was beside her, and together they slept through another day stolen by magic. But the nights were theirs. And that was enough. Chapter 9. the breaking point. 3 weeks into their shared curse, something changed. Era woke from fox form at midnight to find Ainarin already human, standing at her window with shoulders rigid, staring at something she couldn't see. What's wrong? She wrapped herself in the blanket she kept ready for these transformations. Someone's watching the flat. Ice flooded her veins. Who? I don't know, but I can feel them. Old magic, powerful magic. They've been circling for the last 2 nights. I sensed it as Bran but couldn't act, couldn't warn you. Era joined him at the window, scanning the street below. Nothing obvious. A few parked cars, empty sidewalks, the usual urban landscape of a Welsh town after midnight. But now that he'd pointed it out, she felt it too. A prickling awareness, the sense of being observed by something that didn't mean well. Could it be Murig's magic? Some kind of failsafe he built into the curse? Murig is 300 years dead, but... Anurin's jaw tightened. Magic runs in bloodlines. He could have descendants, and if they've been monitoring the curse, waiting for any sign it might be broken, they'd notice when I joined you. Exactly. Fear clawed at her, but she pushed it down, accessed the cool professional calm she used in medical emergencies. What do? We prepare. If they're coming for us, we need to be ready. They spent the next hour fortifying the flat with what magical protections Ainarin knew. Salt lines at the doors and windows, iron nails hammered into the thresholds, bundles of protective herbs. It wouldn't stop a determined attack, he warned, but it might buy them time. Time for what? Era asked. To run or fight. I haven't decided which. I'm not running. He turned to her, frustration sharp in his expression. This isn't a debate, Era. If Murig's bloodline has found us, they won't just want to maintain the curse. They'll want revenge for you, daring to interfere with it. Then we fight. You've had the curse for 3 weeks. I've had it for 3 centuries. I know what I can survive. You don't. So, teach me. They stared at each other, both stubborn, both terrified underneath the bravado. Through the bond, Era felt his desperate need to protect her warring with his respect for her autonomy. Please, he said, and the word came out broken. I've already pulled you into this nightmare. If something happens to you because of me, nothing's going to happen to me. We're partners, remember? We face things together. Before he could respond, the wards flared. Era felt it like electricity across her skin. Every protective symbol they'd placed suddenly activated simultaneously. Something was trying to cross the threshold. Anurin moved instantly, putting himself between Era and the door. His form shifted slightly, not quite transforming but letting the vampire surface. Golden eyes, visible fangs, a predatory stillness that radiated danger. Stay behind me, he ordered. The door exploded inward. A woman stepped through the shattered wood and broken wards, and Era's breath caught. She was beautiful in an ageless way, with silver-white hair that fell to her waist and eyes the color of storm clouds. Power rolled off her in waves, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Anurin ap Gruffid, the woman said, her Welsh accent pure and ancient. Still clinging to existence after all these years, my ancestor would be disappointed. Your ancestor was a murderous bastard who couldn't handle rejection, Anurin shot back. The woman smiled, cold and sharp. I am Hoelwyn Fyrch Murig. Yes, I carry his blood, his power, and his duty to maintain the curse he created. You were meant to suffer alone, vampire. You were never meant to find a loophole. Her gaze shifted to Era, and the weight of it made her knees buckle. And you, threshold guardian, blood of the old ways, thinking you're clever for sharing his punishment. You've only made things worse. I made a choice, Era managed, forcing herself upright despite the magical pressure. A free choice. The curse accepted it. The curse accepted it because you tricked it. Offered yourself knowing your gifts would let you survive what should destroy you. Hoelwyn stepped further into the flat, and where her feet touched the floor, frost spread in delicate patterns. But I won't allow it. Murig's punishment must stand. Anurin must suffer. And you, little guardian, must be removed from the equation. She raised her hand, and Era saw magic gathering around her fingers dark. Hungry magic that smelled of graves and winter and endings. Anurin launched himself at Hoelwyn with inhuman speed. They collided in a crash of power, vampire strength against necromantic magic. Furniture shattered, the walls cracked. Era scrambled back, trying to stay out of their way while simultaneously searching for some way to help. Through the bond, she felt Anurin's pain as Holwen's magic seared his skin, felt his determination to keep her Era safe even as it cost him. No, she thought fiercely. We're stronger together. Her threshold guardian gifts surged, responding to the proximity of death magic. She could see the threads of Hoyland's power, the way they wove through reality. And suddenly she understood. This wasn't just an attack. It was an attempt to sever the bond between her and Anurin, to undo her acceptance of the curse. If Hoylwind succeeded, the curse would snap back to its original form, all the weight crushing down on Anurin alone while Era was freed. And in that moment of magical whiplash, with the curse destabilized and Anurin vulnerable, Hoylwind could finish what Murig had started. True death. Final ending. Anurin, Era shouted. She's targeting the bond. Don't let her separate us. He heard her, adjusted his attack, but Hoylwind was powerful, centuries of accumulated knowledge and hatred driving her magic. She threw him across the room with a gesture, and he crashed into the wall hard enough to leave cracks in the plaster. Before Era could move, Hoylwind's magic wrapped around her like chains of ice. You don't deserve his gratitude, Hoylwind hissed, pulling Era closer with invisible hands. You're not saving him. You're just delaying the inevitable. My family has maintained this curse for 300 years. We won't let some misguided nurse with delusions of heroism undo our legacy. Your legacy is cruelty. Era gasped, fighting against the binding magic. Your ancestor cursed a man for loving someone. That's not justice, it's spite. It's order. Murig was rejected, humiliated. The old magic demands recompense for such insults. Anurin chose love over respect, so he lost both. That is balance. That's madness. Hoylwind's grip tightened, and Era felt her consciousness beginning to fracture, the curse bond stretching, threatening to snap. If it broke, she would be human again, whole again, but Anurin would be lost. She wouldn't allow it. Era stopped fighting the magic, and instead leaned into it, using her threshold guardian nature to do what she'd been trained for across generations. Guide transitions, ease passages between states. Instead of resisting Hoylwind's attempt to sever the bond, she redirected it. The magic meant to separate them became a bridge instead. Era poured herself through the bond, not away from Anurin but toward him. She felt his shock as her consciousness flooded into his, as the barrier between their separate selves dissolved completely. And suddenly they were one entity experiencing two perspectives simultaneously. Through Anurin's senses, she felt his vampire strength returning as her blood sustained him, felt his 3 centuries of combat knowledge available to her own inexperienced mind. Through her senses, he felt her threshold guardian gifts opening doors in reality he'd never known existed, showing him how to slip between moments, between heartbeats, between death and life. Together, they moved. Anurin's body launched at Hoylwind with Era's intuition guiding the attack to exactly where the necromancer's defenses were weakest. Era's consciousness manipulated the threshold between Hoylwind's magic and the physical world, making the spells slip sideways, miss their targets, unravel. Hoylwind's eyes widened in shock. What impossible? Not impossible, they said in perfect unison. Era's voice and Anurin's voice overlapping into something neither and both. Just unprecedented. The curse, feeling this perfect synchronization, this complete unity the ancient text had described, began to shake apart. Era and Anurin felt it fragmenting, the magic that had bound them losing coherence as it could no longer distinguish between the two souls it was meant to punish. The curse required a victim, required separation and suffering and isolation. But they were no longer separate, no longer suffering alone. And the curse, built by a man who couldn't imagine love transcending his petty revenge, had no defense against this. Hoylwind screamed as the curse's destruction sent magical backlash through her bloodline connection. She staggered, and they pressed the advantage not to kill. Neither of them wanted that, but to incapacitate, to end the threat. Anurin's strength combined with Era's precision, his cold calculation combined with her warm compassion. They became something greater than either alone. A threshold guardian who could fight, a vampire who could heal, a unified consciousness that existed in perfect balance between all the dualities that had once torn them apart. When Hoylwind fell unconscious, the magic restraining her dissolving, they stood over her breathing hard, and then they felt it. The curse broke. It shattered like glass, 300 years of binding magic fragmenting into harmless light that dissipated into the night air. The weight lifted all at once, and they gasped as their consciousness began to separate, to return to individual bodies and minds. But the bond remained, stronger than ever, but no longer holding them in forced unity. They could choose now, together or separate, merged or distinct, one or two as the moment required. Era found herself in her own body, dizzy and disoriented. Across from her, Anurin leaned against the wall, looking equally stunned. "Is it?" she started. "Gone," he finished. "The curse is gone." They stared at each other, hardly daring to believe it. Then dawn approached, and they braced for transformation that never came. The sun rose, and they remained human. Anurin laughed, a sound of pure disbelief and joy. "We did it. We actually did it." Era wanted to celebrate, to cry, to dance, but her nurse's instincts kicked in. "Hoylwyn, we need to secure her before she wakes." They bound the unconscious necromancer with what materials they could find, then called Father Reese, the only person with knowledge of magic they could trust. He arrived within the hour, took one look at the situation, and made a call to someone he referred to only as the Council. "They handle magical disputes," he explained. "Keep practitioners from harming each other or exposing magic to the mundane world. Hoylwyn will face consequences for attacking you." "We don't want revenge," Era said quickly. "We just want to be left alone. The Council will ensure that, especially once they hear how you broke a 300-year-old curse through perfect synchronization. That's going to be studied for generations." After Hoylwyn was taken away and Father Reese left with promises to help repair the flat, Ira and Anurin finally collapsed on the sofa, the only piece of furniture that had survived the fight. "What do we do now?" Ira asked. Anurin took her hand, studied her face in the morning light he hadn't seen in 3 centuries. "I have no idea. I never thought past breaking the curse. We could do anything. Go. Anywhere. We could." He turned her hand over, traced the scar on her palm from their blood bond. "Or we could stay here. Build something normal. Or as normal as a vampire and a threshold guardian can manage. I'd like that. Normal sounds good." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun climbed higher. No longer a threat. No longer a timer counting down to transformation. "Free. Thank you," Anurin said softly. "For choosing me. For seeing past the monster to who I was. Who I could be again. Thank you for letting me. For trusting me with your curse, your pain, your 300 years of survival. What we did, the merging, the perfect synchronization. I've never felt anything like that. We were truly one being. We were, and we could be again, if we wanted. The bond's still there. Does that frighten you?" Era considered. "No, it feels right. Like we're meant to be able to do that. Like it's not losing ourselves but expanding who we are. I love you," he said. And the words came easy, natural. "Not as I loved Isolde, that was youth and ignorance. This is choice and knowledge and partnership. I love who you are, how you think, the way you face impossible things with stubborn courage." "I love you too," Era replied, and meant it with her whole heart. Not despite the darkness, but including it. "All of you, monster and man, ancient and new, cursed and free." They kissed as the morning sun streamed through the broken window, 2 people who'd found each other across impossible circumstances and chosen to build something beautiful from their shared brokenness. Chapter 10. New Beginnings. 6 months later, Era stood in the garden of a small cottage they'd bought in the Braken Beacons, watching Anurin work the soil with hands that had finally learned gentleness. He still couldn't go out in full sunlight. Some vampire traits remained even after the curse broke, but the morning and evening hours were his, and he used them to coax flowers from the earth with the same determination he'd once used to survive. "The roses are doing well," she called from the doorway. He looked up, smiled, and her heart still caught at the sight. Joy looked good on him. He wore it more easily now. 300 years of suffering finally beginning to fade into memory rather than present reality. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said, gesturing to the herb garden Era had planted. Threshold guardian cultivating liminal plants, very traditional. She joined him in the garden, knelt beside him in the dirt. She'd also probably lecture us about proper magical hygiene. "I found another note in her journal yesterday. Apparently we're supposed to cleanse the cottage monthly with salt and vervain. We should probably do that, especially after Father Reese mentioned the council wants to visit." Era groaned. "I thought we'd convince them we're not going to cause magical disasters. We broke a 300-year-old curse and achieved perfect synchronization. Something most magical partnerships spend lifetimes trying to accomplish. They're curious, not suspicious." He caught her hand, kissed her palm. "Besides, I think they want to document our bond. For research purposes. As long as they don't expect us to teach classes. I already turned down that request. She laughed, leaned against him, felt the bond between them humming contentedly. They'd learned to control the synchronization, could merge when needed, separate when wanted, exist in comfortable partnership the rest of the time. It was balance, finally. Equilibrium. Era had returned to nursing part-time, working at a small clinic in the nearest village. Her threshold guardian gifts made her invaluable in hospice care she could sense when death approached, could ease transitions, could offer comfort to both the dying and their families in ways that seemed miraculous, but were simply her heritage expressing itself. Anurin had started writing. 300 years of memories were worth documenting, he'd decided. Though he wrote it as fiction, historical fantasy, he called it, with a wry smile. His first manuscript sat with a publisher in Cardiff, and early feedback suggested it would find an audience. They were building a life. Together but separate, merged but distinct, honoring both their individual identities and their shared bond. I want to show you something, Anurin said suddenly. He stood, pulled her up, led her around the cottage to the back garden where he'd been working on a project he'd kept secret. A memorial stood there, beautiful in its simplicity. White stone carved with names. Isolde, Furch, Morgan Gwenllian. Those we loved and lost, but carry forward. Era's throat tightened. You made this? We both carry ghosts. I thought they deserved acknowledgement. Not shrines, we're not living in the past. But recognition that they were part of our journeys, that they shaped who we became. She traced Gwenllian's name. Felt grief rise and crest and settle into something bearable. Thank you. This is perfect. I was thinking we could plant something here. Something that blooms in both their memories. White roses, Era decided. For Isolde, and she thought of her sister, her bright energy. Daffodils for Gwenllian. She loved spring. They spent the afternoon planting, working side by side, talking about their lost ones easily now. The grief remained, would always remain, but it had transformed into something gentler memory instead of wound, honor instead of haunting. As sunset approached, Era felt the familiar pull of the bond strengthening. They'd discovered that twilight hours, those liminal times between day and night, amplified their connection, made synchronization easier. Want to merge? Anurin asked, feeling it too. For a bit. They sat together on the garden bench, held hands, and let their consciousness flow together. Not the desperate unity they'd achieved fighting Hoylwyn, but peaceful integration too, becoming one, becoming two again. Easy as breathing. Through merged awareness, they experienced the garden in double vision. Anurin's vampire senses tasting magic in the soil, Era's threshold guardian gifts feeling the boundary between life and death in every growing thing. Together, they perceived wholeness neither could see alone. This is what we were meant for, Era and Anurin thought. Not the curse, but the bond, the partnership, the choice to be more together than we are apart. They separated as the sun finished setting, both smiling. I never get tired of that, Era said. Neither do I, though I'm still amazed you don't find it overwhelming. It would be, with anyone else. With you, it just feels right. A car pulled up the cottage's small drive. Father Reese, they realized, here for his weekly visit. He'd become a friend over the months, fascinated by their bond, supportive of their journey toward normalcy. Evening, he called, approaching, with a basket. Brought some of the church's famous Welsh cakes. Mrs. Morgan insisted you needed proper feeding. They invited him in, made tea, spent the evening in comfortable conversation about ordinary things. Village gossip, Anurin's book progress, Era's patience. Magic wove through it all. Of course, Father Reese was still coordinating with the council on their behalf, but it had become background instead of foreground. After he left, Era and Anurin stood together at the cottage door, looking out at the garden they'd built, the life they'd created. Do you ever regret it? Anurin asked quietly. Taking on the curse? You could have had a normal life. This is normal. For us. She leaned into him. And no, never. You gave me purpose when I'd lost everything. A second chance at living instead of just surviving. You gave me freedom. And more, you gave me family again. Partnership. Love that doesn't demand I be anything except myself. We saved each other. We did. They went inside as full dark settled, and Ira built a fire while Anurin made dinner, a reversal of traditional roles they'd fallen into naturally. He still needed blood occasionally, which she provided willingly, but he'd learned to supplement with animal sources and rare steaks. The hunger was manageable now. no longer the desperate gnawing thing it had been under the curse. Later, curled together in bed, Era asked the question she'd been wondering about for weeks. What's next for us? We've broken the curse, built a home, found balance. What's the next chapter? Nurin was quiet for a moment, thinking, I don't know. And I find that thrilling instead of terrifying. For 300 years, I knew exactly what came next. Midnight, transformation, forgetting, repeat. Now, anything's possible. We could travel. You've never seen most of the modern world. We could. Or we could stay here, sink roots deeper. We could do research, help other cursed people. God, we couldn't. We? He sounded odd. Use what we learned to help others trapped in magical punishment. Or we could just live. Garden and write and work and be together. No grand purpose, just existence. Is that allowed? After everything? She kissed him softly. I think we've earned the right to choose what comes next. Whatever that looks like. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the bond between them pulsing like a second heartbeat. And for the first time in either of their lives, the future felt limitless instead of predetermined. Chapter 11. Echoes and Choices. A year after the curse broke, Ira received a letter. It arrived by conventional post, though the seal was anything but conventional pressed wax in deep purple, marked with symbols she recognized from her grandmother's journals. Official magical correspondence. And Nurin watched as she opened it, both of them curious and slightly wary. They'd had minimal contact with the council since Heilwin's trial, preferring to build their quiet life away from magical politics. The letter was from someone calling themselves the Keeper of Records, written in formal Welsh. Honored Threshold Guardian and Liberated Vampire. We write to request your assistance in a matter of some delicacy. A young woman, recently cursed by a jilted lover, has been trapped in a transformation cycle similar to what you experienced. Traditional breaking methods have failed. We believe your unique bond and experience might offer insight we lack. We do not ask lightly, knowing you have earned your peace. But she suffers, and we have no other recourse. Should you choose to help, contact us at your earliest convenience. Respectfully, Branwen, Keeper of Records. Era set down the letter, met Nurin's gaze. What do you think? She asked. I think we both know what we're going to do. She smiled. We're going to help her. We are. Because we know what it's like to be trapped. And we know no one should suffer alone. He took her hand. But, this time, we go in prepared. Together. No martyrdom, no sacrificing yourself. Partners? Always. They contacted Branwen, arranged to meet the cursed woman Sari, a university student who'd been transformed into an owl each sunset, losing her human mind until dawn. Her story was heartbreakingly familiar. A relationship ended, a partner who couldn't accept rejection, magic used as punishment instead of letting go. Over the following months, Eira and Nurin worked with Sari, teaching her what they'd learned about transformation, about maintaining identity across forms, about finding someone willing to share the burden. It wasn't easy, her curse was different in key ways, designed by someone with less skill than Marig but equal malice. But they persevered, and when Sari finally broke free, thanks partly to their guidance and partly to her own fierce determination, Eira and Nurin understood they'd found their purpose, not to seek out cursed people, but to be available when found, to offer hope, knowledge, and partnership to those trapped in magical punishment. They became consultants. Of sorts, the council sent them the difficult cases people bound by transformation curses, blood oaths, magical contracts gone wrong. Sometimes Eira and Nurin could help directly. Other times, they simply offered perspective, the knowledge that curses could be survived and even broken. Their cottage became a sanctuary, a place where the magically afflicted could visit, find respite, learn from two people who'd faced the worst magic could do and emerged not just intact, but stronger. And through it all, their bond deepened. They learned new ways to merge, discovered aspects of synchronization they hadn't known existed, became so practiced at unity that they could slip in and out of merged consciousness as easily as breathing. But they never lost themselves. That was the key lesson they taught everyone who came to them. Partnership didn't require erasure. Love, whether romantic, platonic, or the indefinable thing they shared, was about expansion, not diminishment. One evening, 2 years after the curse broke, they sat in their garden watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. Do you ever miss it? Era asked idly. The simplicity of just surviving? Enerin laughed. God, no. This is infinitely better. Purpose beats mere survival every time. Even with the complications? The council politics? The difficult cases? The constant requests for help? Especially with those, they mean we matter, that we're using what we learned for something beyond ourselves. He pulled her close. Besides, I have you. Everything else is just details. Sentimental vampire. Stubborn threshold guardian. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, and Era felt the familiar pull of twilight strengthening their bond. Without discussion, they merged so practiced now, it took mere seconds, and experienced the sunset as one being with two perspectives. Perfect synchronization, achieved not through desperation or curse-breaking necessity, but through love and choice and years of practice. When they separated, both were smiling. Should we tell the council we've figured out how to maintain merged consciousness for hours at a time? Anarin asked. And deal with the barrage of research requests? Absolutely not. Wise choice. They went inside as stars emerged, and Era started dinner while Anurin worked on his third book, this one not fiction, but a practical guide for people navigating magical bonds. They'd been asked to write it by the council, and while Anurin complained about the project regularly, she could feel his pride through the bond. Later, reading in bed Era with a medical journal, and Urin with a fantasy novel he'd been meaning to finish, she felt a wave of contentment so profound it made her eyes sting. This was what they'd fought for. Not just freedom from the curse, but the right to build this. Ordinary evenings, comfortable silence, the simple joy of existing alongside someone who knew you completely and loved you anyway. Thank you, she said softly. And Urin looked up from his book. For what? For being worth saving. For letting me save you. For saving me right back. He set aside the novel, pulled her close. Thank you for being stubborn enough to adopt a cursed vampire disguised as a cat. For seeing past the impossible to what could be. For choosing me, every day, even when I'm difficult. You're not that difficult, liar. They laughed together, and through the bond, Era felt his joy mirroring hers, amplifying it, reflecting it back until they were both nearly overwhelmed by the sheer rightness of this moment. Outside, the moon rose over their cottage, indifferent and eternal. Inside, two people who'd been broken by magic learned they could be healed by it too. Not the dramatic, world-changing magic of curses and combat, but the quiet magic of partnership, of choice, of two souls deciding to be more together than they could ever be apart. And in the space between day and night, between life and death, between human and other, they found their home. Chapter 12. Epilogue. The Threshold. 5 years after Ira adopted a black cat that turned into a vampire every midnight, she stood in the garden of their cottage and watched Ainarin teach a young man named Idris about transformation magic. Idris had been cursed 3 months ago, turned into a raven each dawn, trapped until sunset. His case was complicated, the curse woven by someone with deep knowledge of avian magic. But they were making progress. The key, Ainarin explained patiently, is not to fight the animal consciousness. That only exhausts you. Instead, you learn to exist alongside it. 2 minds, 1 body in harmony rather than conflict. But I lose myself, Idris protested. When I'm the raven, I forget everything human. For now. But with practice, you can maintain a thread of awareness. Watch. Anurin transformed not into Bran anymore, but into the shape he'd chosen to keep. A large black cat with amber eyes. They'd discovered after the curse broke that he could still shapeshift, the vampire magic having permanently altered him to allow controlled transformation. Ira felt him through the bond, felt his human consciousness remaining fully aware even in feline form. He demonstrated for Idris, moving with obvious intelligence, even using a paw to point at specific pages in the book Ira had open. Then he transformed back, seamless and controlled. See? The curse forced the split. But once broken, you can reclaim both forms as aspects of yourself rather than separate prisons. Idris looked awed and overwhelmed in equal measure. How long did it take you to learn that? Years. But I was also dealing with being a vampire and 3 centuries of trauma. You have advantages I didn't. Knowledge, support, and... He glanced at Era with a smile that still made her heart flutter. Someone who understands thresholds. Era stepped forward. Want to try something? A guided transformation, where I help you maintain awareness, They'd developed this technique over years of helping others, using Ira's threshold guardian gifts to ease people through state changes while keeping their identities intact. It didn't work for everyone, but for those it did help, the results were remarkable. Idris agreed nervously. Ira placed her hands on either side of his head, felt for the edges of the curse binding him. There, the magic that forced separation between human and raven consciousness. She couldn't break it. That would require the specific conditions his curse demanded. But she could blur the boundary, create space for both aspects to coexist. Let the transformation come, she instructed softly. But imagine me as an anchor. Hold on to my voice, my presence. You're not leaving humanity behind. You're expanding to include both. Dawn was minutes away. As the sun rose, Idris began to change, and Ira held the threshold open, kept the doorway between his two selves from slamming shut. When the raven stood where the young man had been, its eyes were bright with obvious intelligence. It cocked its head, looked at its wings, caught once not a bird sound, but something almost like words. "Well done," Anurin said warmly. "You're still aware, still yourself." The raven Idris bobbed its head in clear acknowledgement. They spent the morning helping him practice, and by the time sunset approached and he transformed back to human, Idris was crying. "I remembered," he gasped. "Everything. I was the raven, but I was also me. I didn't lose myself. You'll still need to work on it," Ira warned gently. "Maintaining that awareness takes energy, but now you know it's possible. Thank you. Thank you both." He looked between them with something like reverence. "The council said you were miracle workers. I thought they were exaggerating. We're just people who got very good at living with magic we didn't choose," Anurin corrected. "You'll get there too." After Idris left, Ira and Anurin sat together on their garden bench, tired but satisfied. "That's the 5th person this month," Ira noted. "Word is spreading. We'll need to set boundaries soon, or we'll never have time for ourselves." "Agreed. Maybe once a week? We take one case, give them our full attention, but protect the rest of our time?" Perfect compromise. They sat in comfortable silence as afternoon faded toward evening. Their life had found its rhythm, helping others without sacrificing themselves, building community without losing privacy, existing in the magical world without being consumed by it. Ira's nursing work continued at the clinic, where her abilities made her invaluable but not irreplaceable. Anurin's books had found an audience. His historical fantasy series was popular enough that he'd been invited to conventions, though he politely declined. They maintained their cottage, their garden, their quiet existence punctuated by magical consultations and council correspondence. And they had each other. "Merge with me?" Anurin asked as twilight approached. "Always." They slipped into synchronization as easily as breathing now, two becoming one, experiencing the garden through combined senses. The roses Anurin had planted bloomed in profusion, and through merged consciousness, they perceived each flower as both beautiful and mathematically perfect, artistic and scientific simultaneously. This was their gift, they'd realized, not just to themselves, but to the magical community. Proof that perfect synchronization was possible, that love could transcend individual limitation, that partnership could be both union and individuality preserved. As stars emerged overhead, they separated and walked inside, hands linked. "Do you ever imagine how it would have been if we'd never met?" Ira asked. "Sometimes. I'd still be Bran, probably, wandering from shelter to shelter, hoping each midnight that someone would finally see me, understand me, choose me, and I'd still be drowning in grief, going through the motions, wishing I'd died instead of Gwenllian. We saved each other from those futures. We did." Ira started making tea while Anurin built a fire in the hearth. Domestic rituals they'd perfected over years. Small acts of care that built into a life worth living. "I've been thinking," Anurin said carefully. "About Isolde. About Murig. About how the curse started with inability to handle rejection, to accept that love can't be forced or controlled. And I'm grateful. Not for the curse, I wouldn't wish that suffering on anyone, but for what it taught me about love. Real love. The kind that chooses instead of demands, that gives freedom instead of taking it." "You learned that in 300 years of suffering?" "No." He smiled at her across the kitchen. "I learned it in 5 years of loving you." Ira's breath caught. They didn't often speak this directly about their feelings, comfortable in the daily demonstration of care and partnership. But sometimes words mattered. "I love you too," she said. More than I ever loved my grief. More than I ever loved my guilt. You taught me that surviving isn't the same as living, and that living with someone is infinitely better than existing alone. They came together in the middle of the kitchen, holding each other as the kettle whistled and the fire crackled and the world continued its indifferent spinning. What's next for us? Anurin asked, echoing the question they'd asked each other countless times. More of this. Helping people. Growing our garden. Writing your books. Working at the clinic. Just living. Sounds perfect. And it was. 3 more years passed. The cottage had expanded slightly, an addition for a proper library, where they kept their growing collection of magical texts and transformation research. The garden had become renowned in magical circles, a living laboratory of liminal plants that thrived under threshold guardian cultivation. They'd helped dozens of cursed people now, developed techniques that the council had officially adopted, written papers that were studied by magical practitioners across Europe. Their bond had become the standard by which other magical partnerships were measured. But to them, it was still just life. One autumn evening, Aira stood at the edge of their property, looking out at the black mountains in the distance, thinking about her grandmother who'd written those prophetic words in her journal, about Gwenllian who'd believed in magic when Aira had been skeptical, about the strange twisting path that had led her here. Anurin joined her, slipped an arm around her waist. What are you thinking about? Destiny. Choice. Whether we make our own paths or follow ones already written. Both, I suspect. The path was there, the curse. Your heritage, the bond, but we chose how to walk it. That made all the difference. Do you think we're done? With the dramatic parts of our story? He laughed. I hope so. I've had enough drama for several lifetimes. But you'd face more if you had to. With you? Always. They stood together as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of amber and rose, and Aira felt profound peace settle over her. This was what happy endings looked like. Not the absence of challenge, but the presence of partnership. Not the elimination of darkness, but the courage to face it together. Her phone buzzed a text from the council about another cursed individual seeking help. She showed it to Anurin, and they had a silent conversation through the bond, weighing fatigue against compassion, self-care against service. Next week, Aira decided, we'll help them next week. This week is ours. Perfect. They went inside their cottage, their sanctuary, their home, their hard-won peace, and as the door closed behind them, the bond between them pulsed with contentment. 2 souls who'd been broken and cursed and lost, who'd found each other in darkness and built light together, who'd learned that the greatest magic wasn't in transformation or power or dramatic gesture, but in the simple choice to love and be loved in return. The threshold guardian and the vampire, the woman and the man who'd been a cat, partners, lovers, friends, forever changed, forever choosing, forever free. And in the space between day and night, between life and death, between curse and blessing, they lived happily ever after, not because their story ended, but because they'd learned to write it together.